The courtroom was filled to capacity, each seat occupied, each corner abuzz, each set of eyes anticipating what was to come. Journalists held on to their pads, microphones at the ready. Camera crews kept their lenses fixed on the double wooden doors at the rear. Even the air was thick, almost stifling, as if the room itself were aware that something was going to erupt. No sound ventured above the tension. There were no coughs, no whispers, not even the rustle of papers. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, fearful that the slightest sound would shatter the delicate atmosphere. Then, at last, the door creaked open. Everyone's eyes snapped toward it. Christine Brown entered. She did not hurry. She did not smile. She walked with a calm determination, her footsteps slow, ringing off the gleaming floor like a rhythm of fate. Her face was impassive, her features set, but her eyes spoke otherwise. Her eyes flamed with resolve, but in the back of that fire was pain, a pain so raw it could not be missed. In her arms, clutched against her chest, she held a stout folder, its edges creased, its papers bulging like it contained more than papers. To all who observed, it was no ordinary folder. It was a weapon, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode, and no one had any idea what was packed inside. Kody Brown fidgeted restlessly in his chair at the defense table. His stance, once arrogant and brash, now seemed small, agitated. He adjusted his collar, wiped his sweaty palms on his pants, and looked nervously at his lawyer, who leaned forward with a softly spoken reassurance. But Kody's eyes gave him away. They darted to Christine, filled with fear. Next to him was Robyn Brown, tense with lips that quivered. Her hands fisted the material of her dress, white knuckles showing. She shifted toward Kody, whispering something he alone could discern, but he never answered. His gaze was fixed intently on Christine, who had not even glanced his direction yet. In the rear of the courtroom, Meri and Janelle sat together. Their skin was pale but determined, their eyes unflinching. They had lived long enough in the shadows of this family, long enough under the burden of secrets. Now, like everyone else, they were waiting to see what Christine would do. The whispers began, soft at first, then louder. The audience members huddled together, asking questions, guessing, was Christine at the hall to accuse Kody of something? Was she going to finally reveal the secret everybody had whispered about for so long? But before the speculation could get louder, a harsh noise cut through the silence. Bang! The judge brought down the gavel. Order in the court. The whispers ceased immediately. Quiet settled once more, but more heavily than ever. Christine didn't blink. She didn't jump. She didn't even look at the judge. Instead, she proceeded forward, her heels clicking on the tile with rhythmic deliberation. Each step was louder than the previous one, like a countdown. One step closer to Kody, one step closer to the truth. She reached the witness stand and halted. Slowly, methodically, she set down the fat folder on the table in front of her. The thud against the wood rang out like a hammer blow. It was more than a folder. It was a message. Finally, Christine looked up, and she gazed straight at Kody. The silence that ensued was exquisite. The whole room was paralyzed, as if the very clock had been halted. Nobody stirred. Nobody uttered a word. Nobody even took a breath. Every single person in that courtroom knew this was going to be no ordinary hearing. Something much bigger, much more sinister was about to emerge. Christine leaned forward, her hands on the folder, her eyes fixed on Kody's. Her eyes were not full of hate. They were not full of pity. They were full of something else, something harder. It was the eyes of a woman who had held her tongue for too long, who had harbored secrets that no one had the courage to say aloud, and who had come to the place where silence was no longer an option. The judge cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brown, you may take your seat." Christine didn't immediately move. She stood there, allowing the silence to build, her dominating presence suffusing the room without saying a word. It wasn't until long afterwards that she sat, her hands never relinquishing the folder. The suspense was too much. Kody moved again, his tapping foot bouncing against the ground. Robyn's lips quivered more, her eyes jumping to the folder as if it held her darkest secret. Meri and Janelle edged forward, eager to catch sight of what was about to happen. And Christine remained utterly motionless, her hand resting on the folder, as if it held the secret to all things. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Brown, this court is prepared to hear your statement. Do you have evidence you wish to present? The room leaned with him. Everyone was waiting for her answer. Christine nodded slowly, but rather than speak, she let her eyes roam over the courtroom. She glanced at the reporters, who crouched forward with pens poised. She glanced at the cameras, their blinking red lights. She glanced at the audience, the tide of waiting faces. And then, she turned her eyes back to Kody. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was low and steady. Yes, Your Honor, she replied. I have proof. But the truth mustn't be hurried. It has to be comprehended. Her words hovered in the air like a cloud, dense and enigmatic. The judge scowled lightly, but did not pursue. The crowd shifted once more, murmurs beginning before being suppressed by another ring of the gavel. Christine placed her hand over the folder again, her thumb rhythmically tapping against its rim. Her gaze never wavered from Kody's. And it was in that silence that one thing was understood by everyone present in that room. This would not be an easy testimony. This would not be a speedy hearing. This was only the start of something much larger. Something which would shake to its very roots everything they believed they knew about the Brown family. And Christine, cool, resolute, unyielding Christine, was ready to unleash it all. The judge's gavel rang out once more before his stern voice boomed out across the courtroom. Mrs. Brown, you may proceed. Every eye refocused on Christine. She sat perfectly still, her hand on the folder as though protecting treasure, or a weapon. The air was tense. Even the air conditioner's hum seemed to disappear, leaving only silence and expectation. Christine took a slow breath. When she spoke, her voice was measured but resonated through the room like thunder. Years ago, she started out, her gaze sweeping the courtroom. This family lived in the dark. Deception was used. Trust was lost. And sitting here today, she looked intently at Kody, is the focal point of it all. There was a ripple of gasps throughout the crowd. The pens of the reporters scratched frantically, and the cameras rolled in on Kody, whose face turned bright red. Kody's jaw clenched, as he leaned forward. That is not true, he whispered. But Christine turned a deaf ear. Her voice became louder. Behind closed doors, Kody manipulated us. He silenced us. He made us feel weak, while he harbored secrets that would ruin not only a marriage, but an entire family legacy. The courtroom erupted. Murmurs became a wave until the judge thumped the gavel again. Order! There will be order in my court. Christine did not blink. She set one hand on the folder, thumb against the edge. But she did not open it. Not yet. Kody's lawyer stood up, his voice keen. Your Honor, I object to these unsubstantiated claims. If Mrs. Brown does have evidence, she needs to produce it right away. Otherwise, this is merely emotional testimony. The judge slowly nodded. Mrs. Brown, you need to be specific. What is it that you are accusing Mr. Brown of keeping secret? Christine stared directly at Kody, her eyes narrowing. The truth, Your Honor. He's kept the truth from me. Kody slammed his fist onto the table. This is absurd. His voice trembled with rage, but beneath it was fear, visible, real fear. Christine leaned forward, her tone slicing now, each word biting like a blade. You think you can shut me up again, Kody? Not today. For years you led us to believe you were the protector, the leader, behind that facade. You were deceiving us. And today, she wrapped the folder with her fingers, the sound ringing out in the silence. I have evidence. The audience gasped once more. Robyn's face went white. She clamped a hand on Kody's arm, whispering desperately, but Kody didn't even glance at her. His gaze was fixed on Christine. With panic he was struggling, but failing to conceal. Christine didn't open the folder. Instead, she let the anticipation build. Her silence was more potent than words. With each passing second, the room leaned further forward, wanting to know what she held. At last, she spoke. But first let the individuals who coexisted with him testify. Let them recount to this court what they had to go through. Then you will see why these documents are important. The judge's eyebrow went up in curiosity. Well, who do you call to give testimony? Christine slowly turned, her eyes settling on the first wife. Meri Brown. Meri's testimony. Meri stood up from the bench, her footsteps uncertain at first. She appeared fragile, a person who had worn invisible chains too long. But when she was seated in the witness chair, her words rang with unexpected force. I was part of this family for decades. Meri started, her hands folded tightly in her lap. And I can tell you, Kody left me years before the world did. He vowed devotion, but offered me silence. He left me to struggle for crumbs of love, and poured attention elsewhere. Her voice broke, but she went on. I demanded honesty. I pleaded for it. But whenever I challenged him, he flipped it around and blamed me. He made me feel like I was the issue. And now she shot Christine a look. I do know I wasn't crazy. I do know I wasn't mistaken. Because Christine has the truth. Meri's statement made a chill run through the crowd. Even the reporters were shaken. Kody's lawyer stepped in. Objection. This is irrelevant emotional testimony. The judge, however, shook his head. Overruled. Go on, Mrs. Brown. Meri's eyes brimmed with tears. But she continued. I remained quiet all these years because I was scared. Scared of losing what little piece of family I had left. But today, I'm standing with Christine. And I believe her. She stepped down and the courtroom fell into silence. Once more. Her testimony remained there, settling into the air like smoke. Janelle's testimony. Christine's gaze turned to Janelle. Your Honor, I call Janelle Brown. Janelle approached with greater assurance than Meri, her face serene but her eyes piercing. She sat down and placed her hands in a neat fold. Kody desired control. She started. Even tone but slicing words. He dictated where money went. He dictated who received attention. He dictated whose opinion counted. And if you had a difference of opinion, you were shut down. The room was in rapt attention. I stayed with him because I believed stability was better than freedom. But the reality is, there was no stability. He made decisions that harmed us all, and he ensured no one could question him. She turned to Christine and nodded once. Kody believes he's above the law. But Christine has what none of us ever had. The proof. And I'm willing to see it. Her words fell hard, like rocks into water. The suspense continues to build. The judge swiveled around to Christine. Mrs. Brown, your Protestants have been called. Now you must present your case. No delays will be allowed by this court. Christine set down both hands on the folder, her shoulders sagging as she took a deep breath. The whole courtroom leaned forward. Even the judge, who had been stern and reserved, was now looking with interest. Kody's lawyer leaned forward over him, whispering. But Kody hardly heard. His gaze was trained on Christine, wide-eyed, unflinching, frightened. Christine's fingers curled under the fold of the folder. She raised it up the teensy bit, then stopped. She looked straight at Robyn. The abrupt change caused the room to burst with whispers. Why was she looking at Robyn? What was Robyn's connection here? Christine's voice was steady, but it contained a seriousness that made everyone in the room fall silent. Everyone thinks that this case is about Kody, about his lying, about his manipulation. But it's not about him. Her hand rested on top of the folder. It's about the person sitting next to him. Gasps echoed through the air. Robyn's eyes stretched wide, her lips open in shock. She shook her head back and forth, muttering no, no, as if she was trying to tell herself it wasn't so. The judge leaned forward, his eyebrows shooting up. Mrs. Brown, are you saying what I believe you are? Christine's eyes were cold. She flattened the folder on the table and said it with absolute conviction. Yes, Your Honor. The truth that I carry here isn't only about Kody. It's about Robyn. And with that, pandemonium broke out in the courtroom. The gavel came down again. Bang. Order in the court. The judge insisted. His voice stern, though even he looked taken aback by Christine's final words. Robyn sat rigid, her hands wrapped around the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles went ghostly white. Kody's face was red, his jaw set so hard it seemed like it might crack. And Christine, she was sitting motionless, silent, her hand lying on that folder as if it was the only tool she needed. Mrs. Brown, the judge said, leaning forward. Before this court lets you open what's in that folder, your witnesses can go on. But be warned. The truth must be crystal clear. Call your next witness. Christine turned slightly, her eyes steady. Your Honor, I call Meri Brown. Meri's testimony. Years of silence. Meri slowly stood up from her seat. Her footsteps were reluctant at first, as if she had years to bear on her shoulders. The room was silent once more, observing her. She sat in the witness stand, fidgeting with the microphone. Her eyes flashed briefly toward Kody, then away, as if it hurt to glance at him. The judge nodded. You may proceed. Meri swallowed and began speaking, her voice shaking but firm. I was the first wife of Kody. I trusted him. I trusted this family. And for a while I thought he trusted me as well. Her voice shook as she continued. But bit by bit, that trust dissolved. He distanced himself from me. He quit speaking to me. He quit looking at me. I was invisible in my own marriage. She looked at Christine, then back at the court. I stayed because I believed it might change. Because I hoped. But hope became silence. And silence became pain. Her eyes brimmed up. There were nights I wept myself to sleep, asking what I had done wrong. But the fact? It wasn't me. It was him. He chose to leave me while appearing in public as though everything was all right. Gasps spread throughout the crowd. Reporters leaned in, writing furiously. Meri's voice cracked. But she persevered. He made me feel as if I didn't count. Like I was nothing and could be used and discarded. And that kind of hurt, you never forget. She gazed straight at Christine. And when Christine approached me with what she discovered, the first time in years that I didn't feel like I was losing my mind. Like my anguish was valid. And I do believe her. I believe all that she's going to share with you. Her words lingered in the air. She lowered her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. And the judge nodded gravely. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. As Meri took her seat, Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fists clenching. Janelle's testimony. The controlled life. Christine's gaze fell to the next person. Your Honor, I call Janelle Brown. Janelle stood with a strong stride, her face serene, her body straight. In contrast to Meri's delicate hurt, Janelle exuded the strength of a woman who had learned to live through toughness. She took her seat, adjusted the mic, and looked at Kody without trepidation. Kody portrayed himself as the leader for years. The provider. The one who had all the answers. But nobody noticed how he wielded that leadership against us. The room shifted in closer. Janelle went on, her voice acidic. He was in control of the money. He was in control of the decisions. He chose who got his time, his attention, his approval. And if anybody complained, he would find ways to hurt them. He didn't hit. He didn't yell. But he withdrew. He shut you down. He made you feel worthless. She shook her head, her voice constricting. I worked. I sacrificed. I gave everything to keep this family afloat. And yet, whenever I asked where the money was going, Kody brushed me off. Or worse, he told me it was none of my business. But it was my business. It was all of ours. She shot Robyn a look then, her eyes narrowing. And in some way, while the rest of us were floundering, Robyn was always at ease. Her children always had something more. Her house was always safe. We questioned things, but no answers came. Robyn's eyes went wide. She shook her head, back and forth. That is not true, she whispered, but Janelle didn't even glance in her direction. Janelle addressed the judge. I remained with Kody because I felt stability was superior to freedom. But ultimately what I came to realize was that there was no stability. Just control. Just manipulation. And I know Christine has the evidence we all need to see. She exited with head held high, her words trailing behind her a cloud of whispers. A surprise witness. Gwendolyn Brown. The judge leaned in toward Christine. Do you have any other witnesses before we proceed? Christine paused and nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I call Gwendolyn Brown. Gasps from the audience. Christine's daughter. This was not expected. Gwendolyn, standing tall and calm, advanced with a combination of fear and resolve. She sat, adjusting the mic with slightly shaking hands. Her tone was gentle at first. I'm Christine's daughter. I grew up witnessing all of this. And I have to speak up. Because children notice more than adults acknowledge. The room fell silent. Gwendolyn went on, her voice hardening. We saw how Mom was treated. We saw how Aunt Meri was ignored. We saw how Aunt Janelle was controlled. And we saw who got all the attention. Her gaze fell on Robyn. The room burst into gasps. Robyn shook her head wildly. This is ridiculous. She's just a child. But Gwendolyn interrupted her, her voice stern. I'm not a little girl anymore. I know what I saw. Every time we struggled, Robyn's children didn't. Every time Mom questioned things, she was shut down. Every time we wanted Kody's attention, he was over at Robyn's instead. The judge raised his hand. Miss Brown, just stick to facts. Gwendolyn nodded. The fact is, we always knew something was off. But we couldn't get evidence. Mom can. Her voice trembled with emotion. And in honor of everyone who survived this, I want the truth out. The audience broke into whispers once more. The testimonies were piling up, one mounting upon the other. The build up to the reveal. The judge looked back at Christine. Mrs. Brown, you've presented strong testimony. But testimony without evidence is insufficient. The court insists that you produce what's in that folder. Christine put her hand down hard on the folder. She didn't open it yet. Her voice was level, but her eyes blazed. These women have endured suffering for years. My children witnessed things no child should ever be forced to witness. And all of it leads back to the deceptions in this folder. But the truth cannot be hurried. The world needs to comprehend not only what occurred, but why. Kody pounded on the table. This is ridiculous. She's making it up. This never happened. Robyn leaned forward, whispering brutally, her face as white as chalk. Kody, stop. Don't say another word. The judge slammed the gavel. Enough. There will be order in this court. Christine raised the folder at last. Just high enough for the crowd to see a glimpse of what was within. The air in the room tensed to bursting. And then, in a voice that froze the room, she stated, Truly you're waiting for, it's darker than you imagine. The room gasped. The reporters almost tumbling over each other. Cameras firing wildly. But Christine shut the folder again, not willing to show it yet. And that was when the suspense just increased. The court tension was killing. Meri's, Janelle's, and even Christine's daughter's testimonies had shaken the courtroom to its foundations. Each statement they made carried weight to the enigma of what Christine stored in that thick folder. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Mrs. Brown, the moment of truth has arrived. The court needs you to produce your evidence. Eyes turned to Christine. Her hand rested on the folder, fingers tapping slowly against the cover. She looked calm, but the air around her pulsed with intensity. For a moment, she said nothing. The silence dragged on, stretching into unbearable suspense. Then she spoke, her voice low, deliberate, but powerful enough to silence even the faintest whisper. Everyone here believes this is about Kody. About his lies, his control, his betrayal. The crowd leaned forward. Kody sat up straighter, his face hot with rage. Because it is about me, he bellowed, his voice cracking. Christine cocked her head to one side, her gaze fixed intently on him. No, Kody. Not all. Gasps ran through the room. Robyn's eyes went wide. She turned towards Christine, her lips parting as if to speak. But nothing emerged. Christine picked up the folder, at last opening it. The rustle of papers filled the hushed courtroom, as she laid them out on the table like cards in a deck. These papers, she announced, her tone solid, are not only about what Kody did. They're about Robyn. The room blew up. Reporters sprang to their feet, writing frantically. The audience gasped and whispered. Even the judge's face creased into surprise. Robyn leapt out of her seat, her complexion as white as marble. That's a falsehood. She is lying. Christine didn't blink. She pushed one paper towards the judge. He took it, fiddling with his glasses, his gaze reading the page. With each sentence, his brow grew darker. "What is this?" he commanded. Christine replied stoutly. "Bank transfers. Secret accounts. Cash diverted away from the family without Christine's permission. Accounts that Robyn controlled, with Kody's tacit acquiescence." Chaos broke out in the room. Once again, the gavel came down over and over again. "Order, order," in the court. But Christine's voice pierced through the din like a knife. She wasn't just another wife. She was the purse string holder. She was the string puller. She created herself the victim, while pulling strings behind the scenes. Robyn's body shook. She grasped the side of the defense table, her tone pleading. "No, that's not true. I never touched the money. Kody took care of everything." Christine's eyes slanted. "Really? Because these signatures?" She tapped the papers with a sharp nail. "Say otherwise. These transfers came from accounts opened in your name. And the dates line up perfectly with the times the rest of us were struggling, begging for support." The gasps grew louder. Janelle's eyes widened, her mouth falling open in shock. Meri covered her mouth with her hand, tears welling up. Even the reporters seemed shaken, whispering fiercely to one another. The judge read further, his face grim. "If these documents are accurate, Mrs. Brown, then this is fraud." Robyn's knees gave way, and she slumped back into her chair. Her lips shook, tears welling in her eyes. She shook her head over and over, muttering, "No, no, no." Kody spun around to her, his face twisted in anger. "Robyn, what have you done?" She clamped his arm frantically. "I did nothing. You know I didn't." But Kody pulled his arm out of hers. His jaw clenched. For the first time, his anger was not directed at Christine. It was directed at Robyn. Christine came forward, speaking in a sharp and unforgiving tone. "You played all of us, Robyn. You pretended to be helpless. You cried. You played the victim. But really you were creating your own safety net, getting yourself ready for the day this family came apart." Robyn wept, her words tumbling out in hysteria. "That's not true. I never." Christine pounded her hand on the folder, the knock echoing through the room like thunder. "Enough lies. This is the truth you didn't want anyone to see. You weren't the victim. You were the architect of the betrayal." The audience gasped so loudly it sounded like a wave crashing. The judge slammed the gavel again. "Order, order." Christine slowly gathered the papers, stacking them neatly once more. She looked at the judge, her voice steady. "Your Honor, that's why I was unable to tell you all of this at first. Because this is more than a failed marriage. It's about deception, manipulation, and a betrayal that runs deeper than anyone knew." The judge nodded sternly. "These are serious charges. If true, Mrs. Brown, they have legal ramifications." Robyn disintegrated totally, her weeping filling the courtroom. She wrapped her head in her hands, rocking back and forth, mumbling through her tears. "She's distorting it. She's distorting everything." But Christine's face stayed stern. "I didn't distort anything. I just put the truth out there." Kody sat stiffly alongside Robyn, his face ashen, his eyes flicking between the documents and his wife. The man who had once been master of his entire household now seemed helpless, trapped and completely betrayed. There was a silence that was oppressive. And then the judge continued to speak, his voice cutting. "Here in this court, these papers will be read in their entirety. But let me make one thing definite.
This is no ordinary family feud. This is a case of possible fraud and deception. And the penalties will be dire. The gavel came down, its sound ringing like a last chord of doom. Christine reclined in her chair, her expression serene, her eyes piercing. She had achieved the impossible. She had turned the spotlight on Robyn, the wife who had played dumb behind streaming tears and protestations of innocence, instead of Kody, the man everyone believed was guilty. And in that instant, the world observing knew. The truth wasn't only shocking. It was heartbreaking. The courtroom had erupted into mayhem. Robyn slumped in her chair, shaking violently as the charges of fraud loomed over her like a death knell. Kody was quiet, for once his face white, his eyes jumping between Christine and the pile of incriminating documents. The judge pounded his gavel again and again, but the room refused to calm. The reporters were writing so fast their pens were on the verge of ripping through their notepads. The crowd was murmuring in raptures, all of them attempting to interpret what they had just seen. The gavel slammed once more at last. Order! This court will come to order. The voices subsided. The judge glared at Christine with cold intensity. You've shaken this case wide open, Mrs. Brown. But if you have anything more, now is the time. Christine breathed in slowly, her hand lying again on that enigmatic folder. She paused for a split second. Her gaze darted to Janelle, then Meri, then drifted up toward the ceiling, as though searching for courage. As she gazed back down, her eyes met Kody's. Her voice was firm, unyielding. Yes, Your Honor. There's one more truth the world needs to hear. The room stood still. Christine produced a last document, one wrapped in an envelope with confidential emblazoned in loud red letters. She set it down gently on the stand, her fingertips resting on it as if it bore the burden of years. Her voice sank low, a near whisper. This is the evidence that turns everything around. It's why I took the risk of being here today. The judge nodded. Continue. Christine raised the envelope and held it aloft, never taking her gaze from Kody. For years, Kody has presented himself as the victim of circumstance. He said our family breakdown was due to bitterness, jealousy, and betrayal. But the reality is much uglier. Kody's jaw clenched. Don't you dare. Christine overrode him, her voice growing higher, resounding throughout the courtroom. You lied to us all. You lied about the money. You lied about your loyalty. And you lied about what happened to Garrison. The room erupted. A tide of gasps swept through the crowd like thunder. Journalists yelled. Chairs scraped on the floor. And Meri covered her face with her hands. Janelle rose to her feet at once, her frame shaking. Christine, what's that? Christine opened the envelope with unsteady hands and removed a sheet of paper. She displayed it, her voice shaking now, not from terror, but from the excruciating truth that she bore. This piece of paper is a letter. Garrison wrote it. The last words he ever wrote before he died. The courtroom fell silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Even the air seemed to freeze. Janelle slumped back into her seat, her face streaming with tears. No, no, please. Christine's hands shook as she opened the letter. She looked at the judge, who nodded gravely. Her voice cracked at first, but she recovered and began to read.
Dad? I tried. I tried to be strong. I tried to make you proud. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. You never saw me. You only saw yourself. You always said family was everything. But when I needed you most, you weren't there. You were too busy defending Robyn. Too busy defending your pride. You abandoned me. And I can't bear this weight anymore. Christine's voice cracked, and her face streamed with tears. She stopped. Her hands clenched around the paper, struggling to go on. In and around the courtroom, there were sobs. Meri cried openly. Janelle put her face down in her hands. Even the judge seemed shaken, his gavel lying forgotten beside him. Christine took a deep breath and read the rest of the letter. Perhaps someday you will know what you did. Perhaps someday you will understand what your decisions cost. But by that time, it will be too late. Farewell. The last word lingered in the air like smoke. Christine let the letter drop, her hand shaking wildly now. She whispered, almost under her breath. This is what you did, Kody. You didn't lose just a son. You pushed him away. Kody leapt up from his chair, his face flushed with anger and hurt. That's a lie. You can't blame this on me. He was ill, he was troubled. This isn't my doing. Janelle's head came up sharply, her eyes flashing behind her tears. Don't you dare say he was troubled. Don't you dare, Kody. Meri stood next, her voice slicing through the pandemonium like a blade. You disregarded him. We all witnessed it. All of us watched how you dismissed him, belittled him. And now Christine's confirmed it, straight from his own mouth. Robyn, still huddled in her chair, spoke in a hoarse whisper. Kody, tell me it isn't so. Please. But Kody remained silent. He glared at Christine, his chest rising and falling, his fists bunched. For the first time, he appeared cornered. Christine laid the letter carefully on the judge's bench. This isn't about fraud. This isn't about betrayal. This is about a father who walked away from his children, and one child who made the ultimate sacrifice. The silence that ensued was excruciating. The gravity of Garrison's words, Christine's crying, and the shared sorrow of the family bore down on all those in the room. Lastly, the judge's voice shattered the silence, strong, weighed with finality. This letter will be entered into the official record, and I will say this. Never in all my years have I seen a family tragedy laid so bare in my courtroom. This is no longer just a case. This is an indictment of character. Kody slowly slumped back in his chair, his expression empty, his eyes vacant. He resembled a man who had seen the empire he had constructed fall apart before his eyes. Christine turned around, glancing back at Janelle and Meri. Her tone mellowed just so, for them to discern. I promised Garrison I'd see that his voice would be heard. Today I upheld my promise. Janelle cried hard, but she nodded, her lips shaking as she breathed. Thank you. The gavel came down one last time. This court is adjourned. But even as the courtroom cleared, one reality hung in the air. The bombshell had been dropped. The world now knew. Kody Brown wasn't merely a failed husband. He was the father who lost his son. And the reason why.